She is just a servant, the sister claimed, but the Duke bent before her like royalty. The moon, pale and distant, cast long shadows across the cold stone floors, making the halls look alive with secrets. In the grand manor, every corner seemed to hold a memory, a whisper of what had been and what might come. Servants moved like ghosts through these halls, their footsteps soft, careful not to disturb the ancient silence. Among them was Leora, a young woman whose presence was almost invisible to most, yet her eyes always seemed to see more than anyone else dared to notice. Leora carried herself with quiet dignity, though the world saw her as nothing more than a servant. Her hands were worn, yet gentle, and her voice soft, often unheard over the clatter of the household. She had lived in the manor for as long as she could remember, her family's history a mystery even to herself. The other servants treated her with polite indifference, and the noble guests barely registered her presence. Still, Leora moved with a grace that could not be ignored by those who truly looked. The manor's current master, Duke Kale, was a figure of legend and fear. His name alone commanded respect, whispered in corridors with a mixture of reverence and caution. He was tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce through the walls and see into a person's soul. Rumors said he dabbled in ancient, forbidden arts, that he bore the weight of a family curse, and that no heart had ever truly tamed him. Yet beneath the cold, commanding exterior, there was a loneliness that few could perceive. It was on a night when rain tapped against the windows like soft drums that Leora first noticed the Duke in a way that made her heart hesitate. She had been arranging the silverware in the great hall, ensuring that every piece gleamed under the flickering candlelight. Kale had appeared unexpectedly, his dark cloak dripping with rain, and his presence seemed to shift the air itself. Leora felt a subtle trembling in her chest as his gaze fell upon her, lingering in a way that felt both alarming and thrilling. "You," he said, his voice deep and commanding, yet carrying a note of curiosity. "You've arranged the hall well. Leave it for now." Leora hesitated, startled. The Duke rarely spoke to servants directly, and when he did, it was often to scold or warn. Yet tonight there was no sharpness in his tone, only a strange, almost hesitant interest. She nodded, unable to find her voice at first, and stepped back, feeling the weight of his gaze on her like a cloak. As she turned to leave, Alara, the Duke's sister, swept into the room. She was beautiful, sharp-eyed, and quick to notice what others might miss. Her smile was polite, but her eyes carried a spark of cruelty. "And who is this?" she asked, her tone light yet cutting. "Our little servant thinks she can stand out among the nobles." Leora's stomach tightened, but she said nothing, bowing her head slightly. The other servants shuffled nervously, aware that Alara's words could cause trouble. Kale, however, surprised everyone. He took a step forward, not to punish Leora, but to intervene. He looked at Alara with a calm, unwavering stare. "Do not speak of her like that in my house," he said quietly. The words were soft, yet they carried a weight that silenced the room. Alara's lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked away, though her eyes still lingered on Leora with irritation. "As you wish," she said, her voice measured but cold. The tension in the hall did not fully dissipate. Leora felt a flutter of something she could not name, fear, yes, but also a strange warmth. She wondered why the Duke, a man of immense power and mystery, had chosen to protect her in that moment. Later, when the hall was empty and the candles flickered low, Kale returned to the library, a place where shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. Leora, carrying a tray of tea for the Duke, entered quietly. The library smelled of old books, dust, and a hint of something sweet, cinnamon perhaps, left over from long-ago dinners. "You should not linger here," Kale said, not unkindly but with an authority that made her heart skip. "I only bring tea, my lord," Leora replied softly, trying to steady her voice. Kale's gaze softened for a brief moment, an expression few had ever seen on his face. "Sit," he said. "You may stay a while. I wish to speak with someone who sees more than what is shown. Leora hesitated, unsure if she had heard correctly. She had never been invited to speak with the Duke privately, not even in the quietest corners of the manor. She took a seat across from him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Tell me," Cale began, leaning back in his chair, "do you ever wonder why some people are overlooked while others are celebrated?" Leora blinked, thinking carefully. I suppose it is not always fair," she said. "Sometimes the quiet ones notice more than those who shout." Cale's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes, the quiet ones, they see the truth that others cannot. That is a dangerous gift, yet a precious one." Leora felt a chill run through her. To hear the Duke speak of her in such a way, to notice what no one else did, was terrifying and intoxicating. She did not understand why he looked at her like that, but she felt a connection, a fragile, dangerous thread that pulled her toward him. Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Leora performed her duties with the same quiet diligence, yet she found herself looking for Cale's presence, listening for his voice in the halls. Cale, for his part, seemed drawn to her in ways that even he did not fully understand. He would ask questions, small, seemingly mundane things, and linger near her side longer than was necessary. The other servants whispered that the Duke had taken a peculiar interest in her, and Alara's sharp glances became colder, more calculated. One evening, during a masked ball thrown in the grand hall, the dynamic between them shifted dramatically. Leora, dressed in her plain servant's attire, moved through the crowd unnoticed, carrying refreshments and tending to guests. Cale, dressed in black velvet, moved with the commanding presence of a shadow among candles. When their hands brushed as she offered him a glass of wine, the contact was electric. The brief touch left a spark that neither could ignore. Alara, ever watchful, noticed the subtle tension. She leaned close to a noble guest, whispering, "That girl, she is nothing. A servant, nothing more. Yet the Duke, he bends before her as if she were royalty herself." The words stung, but Leora did not retreat. Something within her stirred, a quiet defiance, a sense that she was not as powerless as she had always been led to believe. She continued her duties with steady hands, though her heart raced with each glance from Cale. Later that night, when the manor was quiet and shadows stretched across the walls like living things, Cale sought Leora again. He found her in the library, standing by the window, gazing out at the rain-soaked gardens. "You should not be alone here," he said softly, his voice carrying that strange mixture of command and care. I like the quiet," Leora admitted. "It feels safe." Cale's eyes softened as he stepped closer. "Safe," he murmured. "There is no true safety in Eldrith Manor, Leora. Only illusions, but perhaps in the presence of someone who understands one might find it." Leora turned her gaze to him, her pulse quickening. "Do you understand me, my lord?" He studied her for a long moment, as though weighing the honesty of her question against his own guarded heart. "I do," he said finally, "more than I perhaps should, but that is a dangerous thing for both of us." She felt a shiver run through her. His words carried warning, yet also something else, a promise, unspoken but palpable. The storm outside the window intensified, rain pelting against the glass like urgent whispers. Leora realized that in the midst of danger and shadow, she felt a strange hope stirring. The Duke's presence lingered in the room, heavy and commanding, yet strangely protective. Leora knew, with an intuition she could not explain, that this connection, this tension between them, was only the beginning. And she knew that the whispers of the past, the curses that haunted the manor, and the ambitions of those around them would soon pull them into a storm far greater than either had yet imagined. As Cale departed, leaving only the faint scent of his cloak behind, Leora pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. She understood that her life, once quiet and hidden, was changing. And in the silence of the shadowed hall, she whispered a vow to herself. No matter the danger, she would face whatever came. because she had glimpsed something in the Duke's gaze, something that promised a world beyond the walls of servitude, a world that trembled on the edge of both darkness and desire. Outside, the wind howled through the towers, carrying with it the faintest echo of laughter, of whispers, and of something waiting just beyond sight. Eldrith Manor had awakened. And so had Leora. The rain had stopped, but the world outside Eldrith Manor remained wet and heavy, mist curling around the stone walls like ghostly fingers. Inside, the manor was quieter than usual. The grand halls seemed to hold their breath, waiting for something to happen. For Leora, the quiet was both comforting and uneasy. She moved through the shadowed corridors with her usual grace, yet she could not shake the feeling that the air itself was alive, aware of the secrets she carried, and the secrets that waited for her in the Duke's presence. She had spent the morning in the kitchens, carrying baskets of bread and crates of fruit, but her mind had wandered again and again to the brief moments in the library, to the way Cale had looked at her. The memory of his gaze, soft yet piercing, made her chest ache with a strange, unnameable longing. Leora had learned long ago to keep her feelings hidden, but the Duke's attention stirred something in her, a daring thought that perhaps she was more than a servant, that she might belong in a world far above her station. Cale, meanwhile, had not forgotten her. He moved through the halls with his usual commanding presence, yet tonight his steps carried a quiet purpose. He had called for her twice in the day, yet she had been busy with duties both seen and unseen, slipping past him like a shadow. He had learned to recognize her scent in the corridors, the sound of her soft footsteps, and the way her hair caught the light of the candle sconces. It was as if the manor itself marked her presence, and he could not ignore it. It was in the forbidden wing of the estate that Cale found her at last. The wing was a place no servant dared enter, filled with dusty tomes, broken mirrors, and remnants of the family's past, objects that had long been hidden from curious eyes. Here the air felt different, heavier, older, as though time itself moved slower among the shadows. "You should not be here," Cale said as he stepped through the archway. His voice was firm, yet beneath it lingered concern. Leora began, turning to face him. "I was curious. There are things here, things that call to me." Cale's dark eyes softened, but they did not lose their intensity. "Curiosity can be dangerous in this wing," he warned. "Many have entered and left changed, or worse." "I do not fear change," Leora said quietly, though her voice wavered slightly. She did fear it, yet she felt a strange courage rising from somewhere deep inside her. "And I wish to understand everything." Cale studied her for a long moment as though weighing the depth of her courage. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, but you must be careful. Some truths are heavier than one can bear." He guided her deeper into the wing, past shelves of ancient books whose spines were cracked and faded, past mirrors clouded with dust that reflected more than just a person's appearance. At last, they came to a small chamber, hidden behind a tapestry of a battle long forgotten. The room smelled of old parchment and candle wax, and in its center lay a large, intricately carved chest. Cale opened the chest slowly, revealing objects that shimmered faintly even in the dim light. A dagger with a ruby set in its hilt, a silver necklace etched with symbols, and a folded parchment sealed with wax. He lifted the parchment, carefully breaking the seal, and handed it to Leora. "Read this," he said. "But know this, once you understand, there is no returning to ignorance." Leora's hands trembled as she unfolded the parchment. The words were written in a script older than the manor itself, describing events and powers that seemed impossible. She read of a family curse that had haunted the Duke's bloodline for generations, a darkness that fed on fear and regret, and a power that could only be controlled by those who had strength of both heart and mind. She began, looking up at Cale, her voice barely a whisper. It is all true," Cale nodded slowly. "Yes, the curse is real and it has marked my family for centuries. It is why I am cautious, why I trust so few, and he paused as though unsure how much to reveal. I am drawn to those who can see beyond the surface. You may be one of the few who can help me face it. Leora felt a chill run through her. She had always sensed that she was different, that there was something within her that set her apart, but she had never understood what. And now, confronted with this truth, she realized that her own gift, her ability to sense emotions, to perceive hidden intentions, was not a curse, but a tool. A tool that might save the man who had, without realizing it, already begun to occupy her thoughts. For the next few days, Kale and Leora worked together in the hidden wing, studying the parchments, examining relics, and discovering hints of the curse's origin. Kale was cautious, never revealing everything at once, yet he allowed Leora to take small steps into knowledge that had been forbidden for decades. In these quiet moments, they spoke of things neither had shared with anyone else: loss, fear, loneliness, and the burden of expectations. "You carry yourself with strength," Kale remarked one evening, as Leora carefully examined a silver medallion etched with runes. "Even when the world treats you as nothing, you move as if you belong to it. That is rare." Leora lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. "I have had no choice but to endure," she admitted. "Yet I sometimes wonder what it would be like to be seen, truly seen, as someone who matters." Kale's gaze softened, and for a moment the weight of the curse, the power, and the fear all seemed to vanish. He reached out, lightly touching her hand. The contact was brief, but it sent a warmth through both of them, a connection neither could ignore. Yet the peace was fragile. Ilara's presence loomed ever near, her sharp eyes noticing even the smallest gestures. She grew suspicious of Leora, her whispers cutting like knives in the dark corridors. "That girl is dangerous," she said to a companion one evening. "She has the Duke's attention, and that is never without reason. She may be a servant, but I will not allow her to rise above her station." Leora sensed the growing tension, though she did not yet know the full extent of Ilara's plotting. She focused instead on the Duke and the mysteries they were unraveling together. In their work, they discovered hints of a relic that could weaken the curse, but it was hidden in the forest surrounding Eldrith Manor, a place few dared to tread. The night before they planned to venture into the forest, Kale called for Leora in the library once more. The room was silent except for the crackle of a single candle, its light flickering against the stone walls. "There is something I must tell you," Kale said, his voice low. "The forest is dangerous, more than you can imagine. The shadows there, they are not entirely of this world, and if you go, you must trust me completely." Leora nodded, her heart pounding. "I trust you, my lord." Kale's eyes held hers for a long moment, searching, as if measuring the depth of her courage. "Trust is rare," he said softly, "and once given, it can be the most dangerous gift of all." The hours passed quickly, filled with preparation and quiet conversation. They shared no more than necessary, yet every glance, every brush of hands carried meaning. The connection between them grew, unspoken but undeniable, as if the shadows of the manor themselves had conspired to draw them together. When dawn came, the forest lay before them, mist curling around ancient trees like living spirits. Kale and Leora stepped into the soft light, aware that each footfall carried them further from safety and deeper into uncertainty. The path was narrow, winding, and lined with roots that seemed to move in the corner of the eye. "You must remain close," Kale warned, his hand brushing hers in a fleeting touch. "The forest senses fear and it will use it against you." "I will follow you," Leora said, though her voice trembled slightly. She could feel the power of the manor, the weight of the curse, and the pull of something older, stronger in the air around them. As they moved deeper, shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, and whispers floated on the breeze. Leora clutched the edges of her cloak, but she did not retreat. She had chosen to step into the darkness, to uncover truths that had been hidden for centuries, and to stand beside the man who had, without knowing it, claimed a place in her heart. Kale's presence beside her was steady, a grounding force amidst the uncertainty. Yet even he could not hide the tension in his shoulders, the fear that each step forward might awaken something beyond their control. Together, they moved deeper into the heart of the forest, drawn by the promise of a relic, the lure of truth, and the invisible threads of fate that bound them to one another. And as the shadows deepened and the whispers grew louder, Leora understood that nothing would ever be the same again. The world she had known, the quiet, hidden life of a servant, was gone. In its place was a path of danger, discovery, and a bond that neither time nor curse could easily sever. Yet even as courage burned within her, a seed of doubt lingered. Could she truly face the darkness? Could she truly stand beside the Duke and endure the secrets of his past and the threats of the future? The forest seemed to answer with a soft rustle, as if the trees themselves were aware that choices made now would echo through the halls of Eldrith Manor forever. In the heart of the shadows, Leora and Kale pressed onward, unaware that eyes far older than the manor watched their every step, and that the greatest test of their trust, their courage, and their hearts had yet to come. The forest was alive with shadows, though no wind stirred. Mist curled around the roots of ancient trees, twisting and shifting as though the earth itself was breathing. Every footstep taken by Leora and Duke Kale echoed in the silence, a reminder of the danger that lingered unseen. The further they ventured, the heavier the air seemed, carrying whispers that seemed to curl around their minds. "You feel it too, don't you?" Leora asked softly, glancing at Kale. He nodded, his expression serious, his dark eyes scanning the path ahead. "Yes. This place is not natural. The curse reaches beyond the manor, beyond even the estate itself. It feeds on fear, on hesitation, and on the doubt that lives inside us." Leora shivered, but she did not step back. "Then we must not hesitate." Kale gave her a faint smile, rare and brief, before returning to the shadows. "You are braver than you know, but courage alone may not be enough." The forest seemed to respond to his words. Shadows twisted into shapes, dark and fleeting, whispering unintelligible phrases. Leora's heart pounded as she gripped her cloak tighter. She had never experienced fear like this, yet it was not the kind that made her flee. No, it was the kind that sharpened her senses, that made her feel alive and aware of every sound, every movement, every heartbeat. They walked in silence for hours, the path winding around gnarled roots and fallen trees. At times, the mist grew so thick that Leora could barely see Kale's form ahead of her, but she trusted him. Their steps were careful, deliberate, each movement measured against the uncertainty of the forest. Finally, they reached a clearing. In its center lay a stone pedestal, carved with runes that pulsed faintly under the moonlight. Atop the pedestal rested an object wrapped in black cloth. Leora's breath caught. This had to be the relic they sought. Kale stepped forward, his hand hovering above the cloth. "This is it," he whispered. "The object that can weaken the curse. But know this, it will test you as it tests all who approach. Only those whose hearts are steadfast may succeed." Leora took a deep breath. "Then we must be steadfast." Together they lifted the cloth, revealing a small, intricately carved crystal. Its surface seemed to shimmer and move like water trapped in stone. The air around it felt charged, heavy with power. Leora reached out instinctively, but Kale stopped her with a gentle hand. "Not yet," he said. "We must prepare ourselves. The relic will reveal our fears, our doubts. You must be ready." Leora nodded, her pulse racing. She had faced many hardships in her life, but the weight of the forest, the shadows, and the unknown power of the relic made her feel vulnerable in a way she had never known. Yet she was determined. She would not falter, not now, not when the man beside her had trusted her to face what most could not. Kale took her hand, a brief, grounding touch that steadied her. "Together, then?" he asked. "Together," Leora confirmed, her voice steady despite the fluttering of her heart. The moment their hands touched, the crystal flared with light. Shadows erupted around them, twisting into shapes of their deepest fears. For Kale, visions of failure and loss swirled. A manor destroyed, his family's name ruined, and the curse consuming everything he loved. For Leora, the shadows whispered accusations of weakness and betrayal, memories of moments when she had felt powerless, invisible, and insignificant. Yet they did not release each other's hands. Their grip remained, a silent promise, a lifeline in the storm of illusions. "You are stronger than you think," Kale whispered, his voice carrying through the shadows. "Do not let them control you." Leora closed her eyes, focusing on his words. She thought of the library, the hidden wing, and the moments of quiet trust between them. She thought of the fleeting touch of his hand, the way his gaze had found her even when no one else noticed. Slowly, the shadows began to fade, their forms dissolving into nothingness as she drew courage from their bond. Kale, too, fought the visions, centering himself on Leora. Every fear, every doubt, every fragment of the curse's power seemed less powerful when he could anchor himself to her presence. Together, they faced the relic's test, and at last it ceased its illusions, leaving them in the quiet of the clearing, breathless but victorious. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. Kale crouched beside her, brushing damp hair from her face. "Yes," he said, though his tone held more than relief. "We did it together. And that is the only way this curse can be challenged, through trust, through courage, and through connection." For a moment they remained there, the relic's soft glow reflecting in their eyes. A bond had formed between them stronger than words, deeper than loyalty, a bond that neither the forest nor the curse could break. Yet their triumph was not without consequence. A distant rustle drew their attention to the edge of the clearing. Figures emerged from the mist, cloaked and silent, moving with unnatural grace. Leora's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the intent in their movements. These were not creatures of the forest, but servants of the curse itself, drawn to the power of the relic. Kale stood, his posture rigid, ready to defend both of them. "Stay close," he commanded. "Do not let fear take you." The figures advanced, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Leora felt the same pulse of fear the relic had shown her earlier, but this time it was tempered with resolve. She glanced at Kale, who gave her a subtle nod. Together, they prepared for the confrontation. The clash was brief but intense. Shadows moved like living blades, striking at them, testing their courage and skill. Kale wielded his strength and knowledge with precision, protecting Leora while guiding her through the chaos. Leora, drawing on the courage and clarity she had found within herself, countered the shadows with quick thinking and instinctive movements, surprising even herself with her own bravery. At the height of the battle, one shadow lunged at Leora, stronger than the others. Time seemed to slow as she stumbled, fear threatening to overwhelm her. But Kale was there instantly, catching her with firm hands and steadying her. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment all doubt vanished. She found strength not just in herself, but in the bond they shared. Together, they drove the shadows back, forcing them to retreat into the forest. The clearing was quiet once more, the mist curling around them like a protective embrace. Leora's chest heaved with exhaustion, but she stood tall, realizing that her courage had been tested and had not failed. Kale, his own breath heavy, looked at her with a mixture of admiration and something deeper, more tender. "You have done well," he said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "Braver than most I have known, braver than I even dared hope." Leora's heart swelled at his words, though she kept her composure. "We did it together," she reminded him, though she could not hide the warmth in her eyes. The forest, as if acknowledging their victory, seemed to settle. Mist softened, shadows receded, and the relic pulsed once more, gently as though approving of their triumph. Yet even in that moment of calm, the air carried a warning, a whisper that their trials were not yet over, that the curse's reach extended further than they had imagined. As they made their way back to the manor, Leora's mind raced with questions. What had those shadows truly been? Were there more tests ahead? And most urgently, what did the connection between her and Kale mean in a world so full of danger and secrets? Kale remained unusually quiet, his expression unreadable. Yet Leora could sense the weight of his thoughts, the careful consideration of every word, every movement. He was a man used to control, to power, yet here in the forest he had relied on her, trusted her. And that trust, she realized, was more precious and more dangerous than any weapon. When they reached the manor, the sun had begun to rise, casting a pale golden light across the towers. The estate seemed almost peaceful, the dark threat of the forest behind them for now. But Leora knew that the safety was temporary. Alara's scheming, the lingering curse, and the power they had awakened in the relic meant that their challenges were only beginning. Kale turned to her in the quiet of the entrance hall. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow we must prepare for what comes next, but know this, you have proven yourself, not just to me but to yourself, and that is a victory no curse can take from you." Leora nodded, a quiet pride swelling within her. She had faced fear, darkness, and doubt, and had emerged stronger, braver, and more certain of her own power. Yet even as she allowed herself a brief moment of triumph, a seed of apprehension took root. The forest had tested them, yes, but it had also shown them that trust and courage were fragile things, easily broken by shadows unseen. And so, as dawn's light crept through the tall windows of Eldrith Manor, Leora and Kale prepared themselves, not just for the next step of their journey, but for the hidden trials that would test the strength of their bond, their courage, and the depth of their hearts. They did not yet know what awaited them beyond the estate's walls, nor the full power of the curse that sought to control the Duke's fate. But one truth was clear. Together, they were no longer merely master and servant. They were allies, companions, and perhaps something more, bound by shared trials, courage, and the fragile, dangerous spark of trust that had been lit between them. And as the wind stirred in the towers above, carrying with it the faintest whisper of the forest, Leora felt a shiver, not of fear, but of anticipation. The greatest challenges were yet to come, and she was determined to face them, whatever the cost. The sun had barely risen over Eldrith Manor, spilling pale light across the towers and casting long, trembling shadows over the stone walls. The forest beyond still held whispers of mist and shadow, a quiet warning of the darkness that lingered. Inside the manor, Leora moved through the halls with a purpose born of the trials she had faced in the forest. She carried with her a sense of calm determination that surprised even herself. The events of the past days, the confrontation with the relic, the shadows of the forest, and the bond forged with Duke Kale had changed her. She no longer felt invisible. She no longer felt powerless. Kale awaited her in the library, the quiet sanctuary where they had shared so many secrets. The room smelled of old books, candle wax, and the faint scent of rain that had seeped through the high windows. His eyes, dark and piercing, softened when he saw her. "You've returned stronger," he said quietly. "I hoped you would. The forest tests the spirit, but it also shows who is truly ready." Leora nodded. "I am ready," she replied, her voice steady. "Whatever comes next, I will not falter." Kale studied her for a moment, a faint shadow of doubt crossing his face. "The greatest trial is yet to come," he said. "Not the forest, not the shadows, but the curse itself, and its messenger is closer than we imagine." Leora's pulse quickened. She had suspected that their journey was far from over, but to hear it spoken aloud made the weight of their task more real. "Then we must face it together," she said, stepping closer. "I trust you and you trust me. That is our strength." Kale's lips curved in a brief, rare smile, one that held both admiration and relief. "Yes," he said softly, "together." The castle gates opened that night to reveal a figure Leora had hoped she would never see again, Alara. She moved with the grace of someone confident in her schemes, her eyes sharp with ambition and malice. Yet there was also fear there, a shadow of awareness that the power she sought to manipulate was not so easily controlled. "You've grown bold," Alara said, her voice a smooth weapon. "But do you truly believe you can challenge what has ruled this family for generations? You are nothing but a servant." Leora lifted her chin, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I am more than that," she said simply. "And you will see it before this night is over." Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding and protective. "Alara," he said firmly, "your schemes end here. You will not harm anyone else in this house, and you will not underestimate her again." Alara's eyes flickered between them, realization dawning that the bond between the Duke and Leora was not simply respect, but something far stronger. She stepped back, though her pride would not allow her to leave quietly. "Then we shall see," she said, and turned to disappear into the shadows, leaving a faint echo of her plotting behind. The library grew quiet once more, save for the soft crackle of the fireplace. Kale turned to Leora, concern etched on his face. "The curse has many faces," he said, "and it will not rest until it has tested every part of us, our courage, our hearts, and our trust. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," Leora replied, though her voice betrayed only a small tremor of fear. "I will not fail, not you. Not myself." That night they prepared for the final confrontation. They gathered the relic from the forest, its soft glow illuminating the room with a gentle, reassuring light. Kale studied it carefully, tracing the ancient runes with his fingers, while Leora watched, feeling a surge of determination. The relic had already tested them once, revealing their fears and doubts, and now it would be their guide in facing the true force of the curse. As the hours passed, the manor seemed to hold its breath. Shadows stretched longer, and a cold wind whispered through the corridors. The presence of the curse was palpable, a weight that pressed against their senses, testing their resolve. Yet Leora's confidence had grown. She no longer feared the darkness alone, for she knew that Kale would be beside her, and that together they could face anything. When the moment came, it was sudden and undeniable. A surge of energy, dark and suffocating, filled the great hall. Shadows coiled like serpents along the walls, and the air vibrated with a power older than the manor itself. The curse had awakened fully, aware of their presence, and it was not pleased. Kale stepped forward, holding the relic before him. "Leora," he called, "now is the time. Trust yourself and trust me. Together we end this." Leora nodded, gripping his hand. The touch sent warmth through her, anchoring her courage. She focused on the relic, on the light it emitted, and on the bond between her and the Duke. The shadows surged toward them, dark and threatening, but she did not falter. The battle was as much within as it was without. The shadows whispered every fear they had, every doubt, every memory of weakness and failure. Yet with Kale beside her, Leora faced them with a clear heart. She drew on the strength they had nurtured together, the trust and respect that had grown through trials and tests. Slowly, deliberately, they moved forward, the relic amplifying their resolve, pushing the shadows back. Kale's voice guided her, steady and commanding. "Do not let them control you. Focus on what is real, on what you have earned together." With a cry that was both triumph and release, Leora and Kale channeled their will into the relic. Light burst forth, blinding and pure, and the shadows writhed before dissolving into nothingness. The curse's presence faltered, weakened by the strength of their unity, and for the first time in generations, the oppressive weight over the manor lifted. When the light dimmed, the great hall was silent. Leora's chest heaved, her body trembling with exhaustion and exhilaration. Kale stood beside her, his own expression a mixture of relief, awe, and something deeper, an emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. We did it," Leora whispered, disbelief and joy mingling in her voice. "Yes," Kale said, his voice soft yet strong. "Together we broke it. The curse that haunted this family, that tested our courage, our hearts, and our trust, we have overcome it. And it is because of you." Leora's heart swelled. She had always believed herself insignificant, a servant overlooked and forgotten. Yet here she stood, not only acknowledged but celebrated, her strength and courage recognized by the Duke himself. And in that recognition, a bond that had grown quietly and steadily blossomed into something undeniable. Cale stepped closer, lifting her hand to his lips in a gesture both reverent and tender. "You are no servant," he said. "You are far more than that. You are equal in every way that matters, brave, wise, and strong. And I am grateful that fate brought you to me." Tears glimmered in Leora's eyes, not of sorrow but of triumph and emotion. She had faced darkness, doubts, and fear, and emerged victorious. And in the Duke's gaze, she saw not only respect and trust but a depth of feeling that mirrored her own. Days passed, and Eldrith Manor slowly regained its quiet dignity. The shadows that had lingered in the corners retreated, and the staff moved through the halls with renewed energy, though whispers of what had occurred in the forest and the great hall were never fully silenced. Leora continued her work, but she moved now with a presence that could not be ignored. Nobles and servants alike noticed the subtle shift. She was no longer invisible, and she carried herself with a grace that spoke of strength earned and courage proven. Cale spent more time with her in quiet moments, their conversations deepening beyond what they had shared before. They spoke of the past, the future, and the bond that had grown between them, a bond forged not by circumstance, but by shared trials, trust, and the courage to face fear together. One evening, as the sun set and painted the towers in gold and crimson, Cale led Leora to the highest tower of the manor. The wind tugged at their cloaks, carrying with it the scent of rain and forest, a reminder of the trials they had endured. "Look," Cale said softly, his arm brushing hers. "Everything we fought for, everything we endured, it is ours to protect now." Leora looked out over the estate, the forests, and the distant hills. A sense of peace settled within her, yet excitement stirred as well. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, and now a future full of possibility awaited them. Cale turned to her, his eyes reflecting both the fading light and something deeper, more intimate. He bowed slightly, not in formality, but in reverence and acknowledgement. "You are more than I could have hoped for," he said. "And I honor you, not as a servant, but as the equal of my heart." Leora's breath caught. In that simple gesture, in the quiet words spoken between them, she realized the full depth of their journey. They had faced darkness, fear, and doubt, and had emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The bond between them had grown stronger than any curse, any shadow, or any obstacle. As the wind stirred around the towers, carrying with it the faintest echo of the forest's whispers, Leora and Cale stood side by side. Their hands brushed, and this time they did not pull away. Together they faced the world beyond Eldrith Manor, knowing that whatever challenges awaited, they would meet them as equals, stronger, braver, and bound by a love forged in the fires of shadow and trust. And in that quiet, golden light, with the manor behind them and the future stretching out before them, they understood something simple yet profound. The greatest power of all is not magic, nor titles, nor even relics of ancient time. The greatest power is trust, courage, and the bond between hearts that choose to stand together, no matter the darkness.